Uh, Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the Leadership Retreat Education Without Borders, organized by Sushant University in collaboration with our broadcasting partner, Asia Pacific Accreditation Corporation. While the first session focused on the idea of global education, the vast traditional Indian knowledge system, and the overall role of education in bringing about self actualization, in the second session, we will shift our gears to the actual processes, practices, their impacts, and the way forward. This session will focus on the journey of the various institutional initiatives in India and abroad that explore alternative paradigms in higher education, innovation in pedagogy, financing feasibility, and the contribution of institutional and regulatory bodies to globalization of higher education. Without further ado, I would like to welcome our keynote speaker for this session, Dr. Kavita Sharma, who is an eminent scholar, academician, and author of numerous publications on Indian education systems. She has been the former president of South Asian University and has taught for 37 years at the Delhi University affiliated Hindu College, of which she was the principal of this eminent institution for 10 years. She was also the director of India International Center, New Delhi, for 6 years. In a career spanning over decades, Dr. Sharma has received numerous accolades and scholarships. Notable among them are the Indo-Canadian Shastri Fellowship and the Fulbright Fellowship New Century Scholar for her research on higher education in the 21st century, access and equity. I now request Dr. Sharma to present a keynote address for the session on the actions that needs to be undertaken for fruitful attainment of globalization of higher education system. Please, Dr. Sharma.
Well, thank you very much for that very generous introduction. And thank you very much for having me here. As you said, for having spent so many years in the field, I have become a little, how shall I say, a little ambiguous of just words. Because for me, the actual practice, the ground reality is very important. And unless that ground reality is improved, rectified, no matter what we say and how many great schemes we plan, they are not going to bear the fruit that we wanted to bear. Now, so what I'm going to do is to take the national education policy, the points made on internationalization, and try and see what and how they can be implemented. To begin with, a generalized statement that in today's globalized world, there's a lot of debate that goes on that since we ourselves have millions of students to educate, why should we now create space for outsiders? But to me, that's not an argument, because if we are to live in this globalized world, then we must be a part of it, and there is no other way in the education system to be a part of it than to internationalize it. And especially since the ICT revolution has really converted us, to use a trite phrase now, a global village, and we are neighbors. Every one of us is a neighbor to the other. And what happens in one part of the world impacts the other parts. And we can see it. The pandemic has brought this home to us a lot. It has also created a paradox that while we are sitting isolated, we need to work together, we need to research together if we want to save human beings from a lot of disaster. Now, let us get on to the national education policy. Now, this is all our policies, they keep talking about Takshila and Nalanda and all these ancient universities, but we forget this was 4th century to 6th century AD, and that's centuries away, right? So what happens is, why do we talk about them? Because I think they've become symbols of excellence. So really speaking, what did it entail? It entailed quality teachers. People like Chanakya or Kautilya, however you want to call him, taught in Takshila, and there were the 17 famous Pandits of Nalanda, whose works we are still studying today. Now, we don't have it, and it's impossible to have this quality of teachers in every educational institution, especially when you are moving towards massification and possibly universalization of higher education. Also, the numbers. The numbers today are mind boggling compared to what they were earlier, because it was very elite education at that time. And so I don't think these are comparable things, except if you want to say that we want to acquire the excellence that and the quality that they had. And of course, if you have that, then people will come no matter where you are. People will come because of your own quality and your own excellence. Now, the second thing it talks about is internationalization of curriculum. I know somebody is going to talk about it in greater detail, but really speaking, for India, what does it mean? Well, I think for me, it has to be also something unique that we have to offer, which means, for me at least, you have to create an ecosystem of education from indigenous technologies to cutting edge contemporary technologies. Because in India, there is a lot of indigenous knowledge, and the policy has also talked about Lok Vidya. And we cannot just abandon all of that and say, no, we want to just focus on indigenous knowledge. Oh, there we are. So then we have to think globally. Now, this is what the policy says, we have to think globally. Now, yes, we have to think globally. As I said, that's for me an axiomatic statement. But then we have to remember that we have a very complex system in India. 88% of our higher education takes place in states. Now, if you think about it, these universities are hemmed in jurisdictionally. Not only they themselves have been allotted cities and districts from where they can take students, but even their online programs, they are hemmed in jurisdictionally. Now, I've been for long saying that we should have entrance exams for all universities, whether they are state universities or central universities, and allow all, at least Indians, to mingle with each other. I mean, research findings show that these state universities often run like local colleges. And although, and I know this from experience, that students who are sent there are always crying about it, because although it is supposed to be English medium, but many of them use the local language for the most part of their teaching, because that's what's easy. So, and the other thing is that unless Indians can learn to live with each other, it's very hard to just parachute foreigners into that environment. They're not used to it. I mean, if, just as an example, if Bengalis and Telugus and Malayalis and UPites cannot live together, how do you expect somebody to just come from somewhere and then just adjust to everything? Then policy talks about internationally relevant education and global standards. Now, those of us, pardon my saying so this, but those of us who have been part of the, at least the public sector university system, know how highly politicized our campuses are and highly bureaucratized our campuses are. And as far as autonomy is concerned, we take one step forward and two steps backward, because this scheme of autonomous colleges has been there for, or at least from the late 60s, and it has not been picked up. Universities are autonomous, but they are under severe bureaucratic control. And in fact, for everything, you have to approach the UGC or the respective state education ministry, or the HRD, the human resource, or now it's called the education ministry. Now, the policy also talks of setting up educational institutions in local languages. A good idea, but I don't know how many takers there will be for it and what will be their employability. Because good idea, why do I say? Because a lot of students flounder for lack of knowledge of English. But well, that cannot be a part of your internationalization. Then it also talks about courses on Indian heritage, philosophy, theater, and comparative religion, and all of that. Yes, but that will probably be more attractive for study abroad programs, or those who want to just come for short term to for these courses. I don't see how, in our current state, anybody will come for a degree course. People who do come are those from where they don't have any facility or not enough facilities of their own. And many African countries, some Middle East countries, and then many of them have problems at home, and so they just go from one course. I have seen this in Pune because I did a whole book on internationalization, and I tried to get questionnaires filled up by foreign students, and they're just going from one course to another, and because they don't really want to go back. But those who are become affluent, I had gone to South Africa, and those who have become affluent still want to go to the West rather than come to India. I mean, these are some harsh realities, and of course there are solutions to it. So then we talk of international institutional collaborations. You see, collaborations, the MOUs, again, I have, as I said, headed the South Asian University. We signed plenty of MOUs. I was part of Delhi University. We signed plenty of MOUs. But MOUs are useful. MOUs are only a piece of paper unless you activate them. And the way to activate is not really, I think, institutionally, but through research collaborations, which is in any case happening, because many of our researchers and professors and all these people are already part of international or global research programs. So the policy keeps saying that you keep signing MOUs. Yes, you can do that. It provides a framework, but at the end of it, and I've seen this. It used to happen. Had begun to look like a foreign office, because every second day there was a university waiting, and Delhi University signing MOUs, but nothing really was happening with that. Now, it also talks about facilitating international students and researchers. But again, we in our, at least the public sector universities, we really lack the infrastructure, and we don't do even simple things. Which I ran a study abroad program for American and Canadian students twice, much to the it was opposed at that time by the vice chancellor and dean of colleges and everybody. And even small things like, give them a map of the city, tell them how to travel, tell them what are the nearest eating places, safe eating places. We don't give them any orientation kit, nor does anyone make them feel at home, nor do we understand the pedagogical differences from which they come and try and help them out. So what happens is that again, there are so many bureaucratic hurdles. Like I tell you, South Asian University, only half the students had to be from SARC area, and there was a special visa that the government had made for SARC students. But our missions would not give them a visa. I had to be in constant fight about the visas. And then they wrote to me saying that you must vouch for these students. How can I vouch for them? They are coming on an entrance exam. I have no idea about their backgrounds. It's a blind entrance exam. So, and what's the use of a special visa? Or for a 2-year course, they'll give them a 6-month visa. Or someone is coming for a PhD, you'll get a 6-month visa. And then they say, no, you go back to your country to renew your visa. I had to put up a constant fight about that, because it's our own insecurities. We see a snake where there's only a rope. They think that the university campuses will get flooded with intelligence agencies or some such thing. At least they would constantly talk about it. Now, then facilitating stay. How do you facilitate stay? I think at least my Indian colleagues will vouch for it. Our hostels are in a very poor shape, and unless these are real concerns of the students, or if they have to get paying guest accommodation, well, nobody is there to facilitate it very often. I know in Pune, in places like where these are the hubs, Mysore, Pune, Delhi, many of them get cheated because there's no one facilitating them or telling them what this PG accommodation is like. So But the solution is not what the policy is saying, that you make special hostels for foreign students, because you can't have a disparity between Indian students and foreign students. There will be agitation on the campus. The Indian students will say, why do we have these substandard hostels while the foreign students have very nice facilities? So we have to make the whole campus friendly towards international education, which means friendly towards your own students and your own teachers also. Now, it talks about student exchange, but then unless a special provision is made, the dollar and rupee, this, the huge gulf in that dollar rupee exchange, that creates a problem. So when I had done an exchange program even with Singapore, I found it difficult to send Indian students because they just couldn't afford it. So for every five people from Singapore, and whatever money was saved, I used it to send two students from India. So, because then otherwise it becomes very discriminatory. Only those who can afford it can go, never mind about their actual merit. Now, the question is of faculty mobility. Again, the question is of finances. Now, I know people go to teach summer courses, and I know people go for short term research visits, but really we need enough financial allocations for people to be able to go meaningfully. And I think what happens is that many senior professors go, whereas mid-level faculty should go, because then they have a much longer span of work life in that university, and they get to see different and alternate methods of functioning, some of which they may adapt and or not adapt depending on what happens, their own circumstances. I know UGC has this Gyan scheme, which facilitates foreign teachers for coming to India. But what about the reverse? Our teachers should also be able to go, otherwise, financially, they can't afford it on their own. And the UGC scholarships or fellowships or financial assistance is very little and few and far between. Then research collaborations, as I said. And why do we only look at West? There is also room for collaborating with other South Asian countries. Now, again, when I was president of the South Asian University, I found myself in a dilemma. I had a researcher who was publishing in Nepali, in a Nepali journal, on a subject that he said was of vital importance to Nepal. But the thing is that nobody would, how do you get the impact factor? How do you know the quality? So all these issues will have to be addressed. Otherwise, it'll only be with the West. And there is room for collaborations with universities in South Asia, Africa, Southeast Asia, because many of our issues are different from what is there in developed countries. And many of the solutions that suit the developed countries do not suit the developing countries, because the education level of the common person is not that high. And so we need from mid level to cutting edge kind of technological interventions. Now, I know India gives scholarships to many students, especially in Afghanistan and other developing countries. But again, the visa issues, and by the time the outreach is through our diplomatic missions, so by the time everything gets sorted out and it comes to the Indian Council of Cultural Research, many of these foreign students would complain that half their first semester is over. So we'll have to tighten up our processes so that they actually join at the time when the semester is beginning. Now, many of them who came from Korea or from many African countries, they have language difficulties. And so we need to create processes in our universities by which those language difficulties will be taken care of, whether it is, some kind of a help, peer help also in language, mathematical skills and writing skills. It would be of immense help. And this should not be just for foreign students, because then they feel that, oh, we are being singled out. Again, I've tried to run orientation programs in South Asian University for foreign students. It doesn't work. I had to open them for everybody till the Indian students realized that actually they were not much use. But till I had it for foreign students only, the Indian students were saying this is discriminatory, you are teaching them more than us. Now, again, Indian universities are allowed to set up campuses, offshore campuses. Yes, but finally, what will happen is that reciprocity will prevail. Again, the policy talks of inviting foreign universities, but it says those who rank in top 100. Now, rank in top 100 according to which ranking system is one issue, but then the issue also is, well, why do they want to come here? So, and they will have to face all the they will have to face issues of how much salary can they give, what will be the what will be the regulatory system for them, whether they will have to comply with affirmative action, will there be a cap on their fees. So all these issues will have to be taken care of. Maybe you need within the national commission that has been proposed of education a section that will deal with foreign universities and foreign students. And I think one step in that direction is in the policy that you need to set up inter-university center for international education. Good idea, but I mean, these things have been thought of earlier. I remember if for those of us, for those colleagues of mine who would have that memory, that there was a Pi Head program which was launched by UGC, Promotion of Indian Higher Education Abroad. And 2 or 3 years, delegations went to NAFTA. And I would joke with them that if they actually take you seriously, where are you going to send all these students? So, anyway, but this is a good idea to set up an inter-university center for international education. But this center should then proceed to set up cells or whatever you want to call them, administrative units, to facilitate international students within the university itself. And if it is not to flounder, then this has to be done with a degree of seriousness. Then the outreach and branding. Yes, I remember once talking about branding in a FICCI annual seminar. Outreach, yes, but branding and outreach are important, and in today's day and age, they are very important. But at the end of the day, for me at least, it is your substance. What is your quality? Whether you have flexible systems, whether you are student friendly, whether your teachers are researching and publishing, whether some path breaking research or at least good quality research is happening, whether students have right from undergraduate have research facility, research opportunities, field work. All these things are important, and therefore, if all that is in place, then outreach and branding will have an impact. But if all these are not in place, then I'm afraid there's no point in making hollow claims, because people, when they find out that, oh, what a mess we have landed in, I've had that experience, then they become, word of mouth publicity is more powerful than any other, because when they go back, other students ask them, should we go there, do you think? So, branding and outreach are important, but the first thing is, I think, to set our own house in order. So, I'm sorry if I sound, not very positive about everything, but I really think that we need to recognize these things and take very firm steps. I've been reading about China higher education and how they internationalize, and what coordinated steps they took between the state council and the Ministry of Education and the local councils and the university. Those were the 4th years. They took very coordinated steps. So, and there was no extra democratic thing that went on. We don't agree with that. We cannot have a paralysis of analysis. So unless we take all this seriously and improve our own campuses, well, it will be aspirational, and internationalization will be aspirational. Thank you so much.
Uh, Thank you, Dr. Sharma. I mean, that was a really insightful observations on the national education policy and the ground reality of it. Uh, I now welcome our next speaker for the session, Dr. Vidya Yeravedkar. She is currently the Principal Director of Symbiosis Society and the Pro-Chancellor of Symbiosis International University. She has also been the board member and chairperson to numerous government and non-government organizations like Picky Committee on Higher Education, Central Governing Council for Services Export Promotion Council, Oberall Global India Chapter, Research Committee of the Association of Indian Universities. As a member of the University Grants Commission Central Advisory Board of Education, Dr. Yaravidkar has been a facilitator of innovative approaches to higher education in India. She was appointed as a member of the expert group on global outreach of higher education that implemented the National Education Policy 2020. Ranked number 14 amongst the India's top 25 powerful women, Dr. Vidya has been instrumental in bringing in innovative approaches to promote internationalization of higher education in India. Dr. Yarvedkar, I kindly request you to share your thoughts on the institutional and regulatory policies that govern the higher global education system in India. Excuse me, can you please broadcast Dr. Vidya? Okay. Oh, okay. I mean, maybe we can wait for a few minutes. And yes, is Dr. Sharma still there at the backstage? Maybe we can have a small Q&A session until Dr. Yavedkar joins. Ah, okay, I think Dr. Sharma is taking a break. Uh, is there any question? I mean, until the next speaker comes, we can at least have a small discussion on this. Dr. Sharma has raised some pertinent questions on, that there is a disparity between what the policy states. It's aspirational, and there is a vast difference in the ground reality of it. She highlighted. I mean, yes, it makes sense to you know talk about the past and consider Takshashila and Nalanda University as a center of excellence, but we just can't bask in the glory. So maybe it's time we should move forward. uh, I think, ma'am, are you there? Ma'am, until can we have a small question and answer session?
Yes, for sure.
uh, Ma'am, one of the questions is, I mean, as you had highlighted, that there is a disparity between the policy formulated and the on-ground reality.
Yeah.
How do you mandate affirmative actions that can translate policy into, proper, effective actions?
Um, See, right now our affirmative policy is rigid quotas, right? Caste-based rigid quotas. Now, but we have forgotten that within a particular caste, social stratification further takes place. And some people come up and the others don't. Now, many years ago, I remember that JNU actually had formulated, I think it was their sociology department. They had taken every district and village of India, and then they had made parameters on based on education of parents, where you stay, what is your income source, how much land you have, and so on and so forth. And of course, caste was one of the criteria because there's still a lot of discrimination. But
Mm-hmm.
what happened was that when they put all those criteria together, then their netting of people who actually needed help was far greater than what quotas that we follow. So I think the issue is there are two or three issues in this. One is class and caste. That's the contradiction, the class and caste, I think. The second is that are we getting the people who have been left behind even within a deprived caste? Right. And the third issue is that, okay, I did this study because I happen to be principal for 10 years. We only talk of entry level. There is no tracking of what happens to those who enter. And there is no comparison with the non quota students. So then what happens? And my findings were quite amazing to me also, and that is that yes, while the people who enter through the quota, there some of them drop out because they can't cope, but those who don't drop out actually improve much more than the regular category students. So we have to put all these factors together, because this affirmative action is also for language. I found that a lot of people who were not of the quota system but had come from non-English medium, and they found it hard to cope with all this. So there's so many different factors in affirmative action, and I think it needs to be more nuanced and fine-tuned.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Uh, I think Dr. Vidya, ma'am, again, we'll take up the Q&A session again at the end. So, ma'am, now we'll move on to the next speaker, Dr. Vidya Yarvedkar. To give an, again, introduce her. She's currently the principal director of Symbiosis Society and the pro-chancellor of Symbiosis International University. She has also been the board member and chairperson to numerous government and non-government organizations like the FICCI Committee on Higher Education, Central Governing Council of Services, Export Promotion Council, a research committee of the Associations of Indian Universities. As a member of the University Grants Commission, Central Advisory Board of Education, Dr. Yarvedkar has been a facilitator of innovative approaches to higher education in India. She was appointed a member of the expert group on global outreach of higher education that implemented the National Education Policy 2020. Ranked amongst number 14 amongst India's top 25 powerful women, Dr. Vidya has been instrumental in innovative approaches to promote internationalization of higher education in India. Dr. Yarvedkar, I kindly request you to share your thoughts on institutional and regulatory policies that govern the higher global education system in India.
Thank you, Ms. Bose, for the kind introduction, and thank you very much, Sushant University, for inviting me for this session. Many of the speakers are my close friends, and I respect Kavita Sharma. I wouldn't call her a friend, but a mentor, I must say, because she's been in this whole process of internationalization for a very, very long period of time than me. But nevertheless, internationalization of higher education is very close to my heart. That's my area of research. And in fact, I've done my doctoral studies also in the same subject. And I'm intrigued by the fact of what internationalization should be, or it was in India, and what it should be, henceforth. And the topic that you all have chosen today, education without borders, is something so very relevant, especially in these times when we talk about a borderless world, about borderless countries, and when we talk about geographical boundaries just being notional, and so that there is free flow of people across continents, across countries, so that we believe that the whole world is one whole world, is a big family, and taking us to our age-old mythology, which talks about Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the world is one family. In fact, the university that I head now, the Symbiosis International University, was founded 50 years ago with this very mission of believing that the world is one family. And in fact, it started as a small center called as the Symbiosis International Cultural Center to do something for foreign students who came to the city of Pune to study for their higher education in various colleges and of course the Pune University in Pune. And that's when Dr. Muzumdar, the founder of Symbiosis, realized that these are young men and women who are neglected, who are discriminated, and who need to be nurtured, who need to be taken care of, because they are our unofficial ambassadors of goodwill. And therefore, whatever the experience in India is the experience that they will carry back, and the impressions that they will carry back, not just about the education system, but about the city that they study in, and more importantly, about the country. So, with this thought, this university was founded, and I'm very happy that I'm a part of this whole journey of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, of this whole symbiosis journey. And in my little way, I have tried to not just do research, but even write a book on internationalization of higher education in India, and more importantly, been a part of policy making through the UGC and various committees of the Ministry of HRD, and now, of course, the Ministry of Education. So, when we really look at policies, is there a policy on internationalization of higher education? Uh, I would say no. There is no policy, whereas most other countries and even developing countries do have a policy on internationalization. India does not have a robust policy on internationalization of higher education. In fact, the subject was so ignored because we always believed that there is such a huge Indian population of young students, both at the school level and the higher education level, that we need to cater to. So, where should we even look at foreign students or any other process of internationalization? And that used to really bother me so much when I was at UGC for 2 terms between 2006 to 2012. And I would always talk in the commission meetings and even to the then chairman that we need to really look at foreign students and also look at a policy on internationalization of higher education. But be as it may, at that point in time, there was a committee that was constituted by the UGC called PIHEAD, Promotion of Indian Higher Education Abroad. And that was, I think, the beginning of promoting Indian higher education. After that, of course, EDSIL came into being, and initially it was dormant, but later, since the last few years, it has been pretty active to promote Indian higher education and to attract foreign students. But honestly, the way things should have gone, of course, this pandemic has hit us badly, like it has hit other countries, and therefore, this mobility of international students to India has definitely not only decreased but is almost nil. And so is the mobility of Indian students going abroad. But if you look at even 3 or 4 years ago, even before the pandemic, though EDSIL was active, we did see few pockets from countries where students came in, and few pockets of cities and universities where foreign students went to. But if you look at the whole Indian picture of higher education amongst the 900 plus Indian universities or 51,000 colleges, the picture is very, very bleak. There are just, I would say, clusters of cities and universities which have foreign students. In fact, majority of them don't have. And I personally feel that foreign students bring in a lot of diversity into colleges and university campuses and classrooms, and it is very imperative to have them alongside Indian students for a large part of the learning of Indian students as well. Now, coming to faculty mobility, when we talk about faculty mobility, we talk about the Gyan program, which is again not a policy framework, but honestly a program that was launched to attract foreign faculty members, again done very recently, since the last maybe about 4 to 5 years. But how many of foreign faculty do we see in Indian universities who have come through the Gyan program? Every Indian university that is proactive in internationalization does have foreign faculty coming and teaching. But how many of our Indian faculty go abroad and teach? While you see so many of the best European and American universities that have full time Indian professors, but the mobility of Indian teachers to go abroad to teach is very minuscule. Barring a few scholarship programs through the ICCR and other bodies, you don't see much of mobility of Indian faculty traveling for a few months to a foreign university to teach, leave alone doing research. Of course, again, since the last couple of years, we see, or I would say just about a year or two, we see the Spark grants coming in, which are research grants where two universities, one Indian and one foreign, does facilitate joint research and thereby joint mobility, where their faculty comes to our university and our faculty goes to them. But these are very minuscule efforts in a country as large as ours and in the second largest higher education system. And I think the whole reason is that we've really not looked at opening our borders for international students, international faculty, or I would say internationalization as such. I'm sure many people in the morning sessions would have covered this topic of how Takshashila and Nalanda at one point in time attracted so many foreign scholars, students, and India was the seat of higher education. But what we see today is not a very great picture. And I hope that with these kind of webinars and seminars that we will constantly have, India will come on the international map once again. And I'm very happy that Sushant University has organized one such webinar. So when you come back to students and when we talk about mobility, we only look at least from the Indian context, students who are mobile for full-time degree programs. But there are so many students who want to come to India for short-term programs, especially students from developed countries. We have students from America, UK, Singapore, who are also looking at India, as a place to go and visit India, to do some research, to just be on Indian university campuses, make friends with Indian students, and probably even work or do internships in Indian companies. Are we facilitating this? The answer is no. Again, why? Because there is no policy. So what is the policy to attract students for short term programs? In fact, I was shocked to know that recently, students who came to study English as a short term program from non English speaking countries are not allowed nowadays because of some security issues that the Ministry of Home Affairs has come up with. I mean, I was so surprised because the moment students from non English speaking backgrounds land in India to do or study English in various universities or even English coaching centers, they would obviously stay back for higher education or for their undergraduate and postgraduate degrees. Now you're here cutting this very inflow of students, and therefore students who otherwise came from Iran and from West Asia, the Gulf countries, and Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, and smaller places in South Asia, East Asia, now have stopped coming simply because the Indian government has come up with some security reasons for not allowing foreign students to travel to India. Now here is where I come to another discussion point, that whether it is the job of only the Ministry of Education to form policies, or there should be an interministerial dialogue between the Ministry of Home Affairs, Ministry of Education, Ministry of External Affairs, and also Ministry of Commerce. And I've been trying to push this very, very hard, because no matter how much the Ministry of Education does to attract foreign students, if the visa process is not great and not facilitatory, the FRRO office, which is one of the biggest roadblocks, at every city where the foreign students have to encounter police to do their FRRO registration, if that is not facilitated, and such horrible experiences our foreign students would take back to their home countries, no matter how much the Ministry of Education does, foreign students are not going to be attracted to India. So Ministry of Home Affairs is equally important. The second reason why MHA is important is also for the fact that MHA tries to capture visas of everybody who comes as a foreign passport holder to India. Now, MHA also captures students who come maybe to do yoga or to learn music or to probably, do some short-term studies in a university or maybe in a company. Now, when we look at the foreign students data of 47,000 students that is captured through the Aisha portal, this is only of students captured by the Ministry of Education, because only the full-time degree students data is visualized on the Aisha portal. So the data of students who come for short-term programs is not visualized, and therefore probably there could be more than 47,000 students, and I'm very sure there are, which are just not captured because they don't come under the category of students, because it's not defined anywhere, because there's no policy at the national level. I'm so happy that the national education policy, for the first time after 34 years, has even made a mention of internationalization, and not only made a mention, but has written a full chapter, which is chapter 12 on internationalization of higher education. And I'm glad I was a part of those brainstorming sessions that Dr. Kasturi Rangan had, along with many others like me, and we've tried to get in a few things. Now so this was about student mobility. Again, when we talk about student mobility, have we captured the students who come for research programs? We haven't. How many of foreign students really come to do PhD with universities? I don't think we have data. And this is again one area where we can attract students, because our universities have so much of rich I would say projects, proposals, and India as a land which is like a laboratory for people to do research. Why don't we attract PhD students to India to do their research alongside our Indian students. Imagine a foreign student from, say, Africa comes and does research on agriculture along with an Indian student in an agricultural university in India. I mean, there's so much of learning that can happen both sides, but has it been done? Has it been promoted? The answer is no. Coming to faculty mobility, as I said, the faculty mobility is very poor. There is no policy for faculty mobility, for Indian faculty to go abroad or foreign faculty to come here, other than schemes like GYAN or the ICCR chairs that are being established. But again, I feel that faculty mobility needs to be encouraged through a policy document, so that it's not just that our faculty will get to teach in a foreign university, but more importantly, joint research will emerge out of the networks that they will create with foreign faculty. So something has to be done at that level as well. As I said, when we talk about the interministerial dialogue that should happen, and I covered the MHA, now let me look at what the Ministry of External Affairs can do. Education is a soft power, and there is so much that the Ministry of External Affairs can really do. How many of the Indian embassies really have education counselors or education attaches in the Indian embassies in foreign countries? How many of the Indian embassies or high commissions really promote Indian higher education? Uh, Forget promoting. How many of the Indian embassies really have knowledge about how many universities are there in India, what kind of universities, which are the areas of higher education that should be promoted in that country, and so on and so forth. Again, why? Because there is no policy and there is no interministerial dialogue. And therefore, I think we need to have these ministries to come together. Ministry of Commerce. Now, we have never ever looked at the economic growth of a university or that city or the country at large because of foreign students. It's not just about the fees that they pay. I know some of the universities really charge hefty fees for foreign students, but I think that also needs to be curbed, because foreign students who come to study in India don't come from rich backgrounds. The rich students will always want to go to the West. These are students who come from poor backgrounds, from developing countries, and I think we need to look at them like we look at our Indian students. But forget the fees part. There is definitely a spending that the foreign student does in the city, in the university, and in the country. How much have we really captured it through the Ministry of Commerce? And therefore, I think even Ministry of Commerce needs to look at education as, a promotional activity. And I'm very glad that there is a Services Export Promotion Council. Again, I sit on that governing body, and out of the champion services that they are now going to promote, since the last 1 year they've been talking about it, education will be one of the services that will be promoted. So somewhere we do see a change. But if you look at a policy level, I'm sorry, there is no policy where there is an interministerial dialogue happening, or a policy on internationalization that is looked at. I hope that with the national education policy, we might come up with some policy document. The national education policy has set up an implementation group, which is called Global Outreach, set up by the University Grants Commission. I was a part of it, and I hope that the draft report that we have submitted to the Ministry of Education will be converted into a policy on internationalization of higher education. We've discussed a lot about collaborations, about the regulation and the regulatory framework that presently is, in fact, inhibiting collaborations, which ideally should be facilitated. Dual degrees, joint degrees, twining programs have to be facilitated instead of inhibited. We always talk about collaborations with the top 100 or top 200 universities. Why would the top 200 universities want to collaborate with Indian universities when Indian universities are not there in the top 200 world rankings? And I always feel that collaboration should always happen with like-minded people, with like-minded universities. Why would a Harvard come and collaborate with a Symbiosis? Symbiosis should look at a partner which is equal to Symbiosis, or a Sushant University should look at a partner, foreign university which is equal to Sushant University. When I say equal, I don't mean to undermine the efforts of any Indian university, but we need equals to interact and be partners for a better environment, or for a better collaborative environment. And therefore, we have suggested in this document of implementation of internationalization that we need to facilitate these kind of dual degrees, these kind of joint degrees, so that the flow of not just students, but even of faculty is facilitated. Now, coming to the institutional level, as I said, there are pockets or islands of universities and colleges and cities in India that can even talk about internationalization, leave alone having a policy of internationalization at the institutional level. In Pune, fortunately, which is the hub, I would say it's an education hub of our country, we see a large number of colleges and universities like Symbiosis, like Pune University, and several other colleges in Pune, which have attracted foreign students for, I mean, innumerable number of years. At least I see them since my childhood for the last 50 years. But how many of our cities are really conducive to attract foreign students? How many of our universities are really conducive to attract foreign students, and leave alone colleges that are affiliated to universities? What I notice also, even in the city of Pune, that we see foreign students who actually would come to Pune University, but unfortunately, because Pune University has postgraduate programs, get absorbed or get placed in undergraduate colleges which are affiliated to Pune universities. Now, it could be that a foreign student lands in a college not of his choice. A foreign student may land in a college where there is no other foreign student. And imagine an African student landing in a college in Pune or elsewhere where there is no other foreign student, and just because he's black, because he's dark, he gets discriminated. And that is the impression poor African students that carry, back home. Let me give you a live example. 50 years ago, Dr. Muzumdar, my father, wrote a book called New Faces, New Friends. What did he do? He only interviewed foreign students who studied in various colleges in Pune city. And he published these interviews in the local regional newspaper called Kesari, which is in Marathi. Why did he do that? He did that only to sensitize the Pune citizens that these are our unofficial ambassadors and please treat them well. Do not discriminate them. Because the major problem with foreign students 50 years ago in a city like Pune, which is supposed to be a hub of education, also discriminated foreign students. Whereas they laid red carpets for Europeans and white colored students, they discriminated the Africans and other dark skinned students. 2014, I edited this book and wanted to add another few chapters to this book called New Faces and New Friends. And I interviewed another 22 foreign students studying in the same city of Pune. And can you believe it? After so many years, after almost 4 decades, the mindset of students and the mindset of Pune citizens remains the same. Again, the major problem was discrimination. Now, don't you think that we need to do something about this at an institutional level, at a city level, at a municipal corporation level, when we need to sensitize our people through some things, some initiatives that can be done so that these foreign students will carry good impressions of our city, of our country, and of our university. When we always talk about promoting something, no matter the product can be good, but what about the packaging? So education is well recognized, Indian education is well applauded all over the world, but when it comes to these soft things, when foreign students get discriminated, when foreign students are not treated well, they don't care about the kind of education that we impart. They care about all these little things, because these are the experiences that remain etched in their minds, and those are the experiences that they will always carry. And let me tell you, students who pass out of Indian universities, foreign students who pass out of Indian universities, assume top positions in their countries as diplomats, as businessmen, as even ministers. I mean, I know for sure that so many of the Symbiosis students have been ministers in so many countries, whether it's Iran, whether it's Yemen, whether it's Mauritius, I can name them. But imagine the kind of impressions that they would have carried if they were not treated well in this city or in this university. And that's where Ministry of External Affairs has to come in along with Ministry of Education to also tell people that education is a soft power to build collaborations and to strengthen relations even between two countries. I still remember President Karzai visiting Pune city and Symbiosis International University. Why do you think he decided to come to India and even visit a city like Pune and a university like ours? It wasn't because we knew him personally. It was only because there were 5,000 Afghanistan students who are studying here with us who spoke well about the university and about the city. And that is the reason why a president of a country decides to come here. And more importantly, because he himself had studied in India, in Shimla, and therefore he had carried probably very good impressions when he was a student. So imagine, so many things are dependent on policies that our government should frame. At an institutional level, how many of our universities really have international offices? If you don't have an international office, then how do you even take in or admit a foreign student and then take him through this whole journey of undergraduate or postgraduate education? We have an international office, and many of course of the universities like ours could be having international offices, but I feel more and more universities need to have some kind of policy framework at their university or college level. The first thing to do is set up an international office, and also in that international office select people with the right attitude and right aptitude, because it's not that every person who works in an international office will be welcoming to foreign students. We need to also change mindset of our own faculty. Foreign students are weak in English, at least those who come to India. You need to train them in English first, to give them a foundation course of English. So you need to have an English language center at your university. After that, of course, our own faculty cannot discriminate foreign students. I remember even a faculty at Symbiosis who once said that I'm not going to allow foreign students to undergo summer internships. Why? Because they can't speak English and they cannot perform well. And this was taken up right at the level of the president or the chancellor of our university, and he actually fired the faculty and said that these are the most important people in my university, and no matter how poor their English is, their intent to learn is far more, and therefore consider them as equal to our Indian students and give them not just equal opportunities but even probably better opportunities than what we give to our Indian students. And that is exactly what we want to do. We should do. At an institutional level, you should have policies of internships. Why do you think foreign students don't come to India? Because they are not accepted by corporates. They are not given internships. They are not even, forget giving them placements at the end of the program. So if a foreign student comes and does MBA at any Indian university, don't you think he will want to actually go and work in a company? If not work, at least do internships in our companies, because that is what they come here for. Again, a dialogue that we had during our interministerial meeting that was arranged by we pushing it at Niti Aayog, when Mr. Amitabh Kant and even the Vice Chairman, Mr. Rajiv Kumar, attended. They made it very clear that please allow foreign students to do a one-year internship with our Indian companies. I don't know what has happened to that. I don't even know whether a policy framework has taken place, because it's again in the back burner, and the same story continues. So unless you have policies at the institutional level, unless you have policies at the university level, unless you have policies at the national level, you cannot expect internationalization of higher education in India to happen. You cannot expect the 47,000 number to become 2 lakhs. And I'm very glad that at least these discussions have begun at various levels, at various webinars, even at the government level, so that in years to come, we will probably see a larger number of foreign students who can come to India, and not just foreign students, but have opportunities for our own Indian students to even travel abroad. Not many universities even have a policy for Indian students to go for short-term programs abroad, leave alone giving them funding. Even if there is funding available, how many of our Indian universities and colleges do give opportunities for our Indian students to travel abroad? So all this is, we have tried to mention all this in the internationalization chapter in the NEP. We have elaborated this further in the implementation report that has been submitted by the UGC to the MOE. I hope that this is converted into a policy document, and I really hope that India sees a new picture of internationalization in years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Vidya, for highlighting the importance of experience and engagement. The role of the need for diversity and mobility, and the role of short-term programs, and most importantly, the importance of institutional integration to bring to truly bring about internationalizing higher education. It is what I mean. It's pointless talking about it without actually doing it in ground reality. Thank you, ma'am. I welcome our third speaker, Professor Gautam Rajkumar. He is a senior lecturer at the Faculty of Arts, Society, and Professional Studies in Newman University, Birmingham. His research area focuses on internationalization in higher education, with an emphasis upon developing internationalization strategy in transnational education activity, mobility, and public policy. He has published extensively on the challenges and opportunities of Indian higher education system, and continues to highlight the numerous strength and potential of the system in spite of the impeding nature of the largely onerous regulatory system. Professor Rajkumar, kindly share your thoughts on the process of development of academic curriculum in context to internationalization of the higher education.
Thank you, Thierry. Thank you for those kind words, and thank you, Professor Jutsi, for inviting me to join this distinguished panel at this leadership retreat. So I'll try and share my screen. Okay. How do I make it to go from the beginning? Or do I have to do it from otherwise, or it won't work here, will it?
So
Okay,
it will work.
Because it's going in the it's going slow, so I'll try it from here. Yeah. Okay. Right. Are we okay?
Sir.
You can't see me now. Is that what is happening?
No, sir. We can see you. We can see you.
You can.
Just a minute. Sir, have you shared your entire screen?
Yes. So you don't want me to share the entire screen, yeah?
So I think maybe if you share just your window, it will make
okay,
more
fine.
sense.
I'll do that. I'll just I'll start again, and then it should work okay.
Anybody from APAC, can you please help him?
Is it working now?
So yes, sir, it's working. Yes, sir.
It's working. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So, right. Okay. So once again, thank you very much, and thank you, Professor.
So just put it on slideshow mode.
Yeah, if I put it on slideshow from my main screen, because I've got two screens. Yeah, so it will become full screen comes on. No, that's the problem.
So
you don't want
just increase the percentage of your PPT, sir. In bottom right. No, it's much bigger, sir. Just
okay,
keep
now?
it 90%.
Okay.
Yeah, just little decrease, sir.
Decrease or increase?
Sir, decrease.
Okay.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Is this okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. Okay, thank you once again. Well, these are technical things that we have. As long as you can hear me, as you can see, I hope it will go okay. So what I plan to do or share with you over the next few minutes are some thoughts and views developed over the years, researching and working in the area of internationalization in higher education. So I'll draw on some of the extant literature on this subject and try and interface this with my observations and findings from my on-ground experience. Now, in the spirit of the event today, which I understand is about inquiry, my intention is not to provide any definitive or attempt also to provide any definitive answers, but hopefully to raise some questions for further discussion. I will be using a few slides as you can see, and I hope that through the points which are highlighted or raised in the slides, I'm able to raise in your minds questions which we hope we can address later on during the discussion stage. So let me start to put this sort of session or my session into context. Let me share with you a quote from Professor Peter Scott. Now, this quote is from 2014. It's 7 years back, but it is as relevant then as it is today. Now, the question is, why is it not coming? Yeah, okay, there you are. So if I may, if you permit me, I will just read it out because there are some important key points over here. So it is through education, which in the 21st century must include higher education, that we have the best chance of taming our fears of otherness and creating globally inclusive communities. It is through internationally alert universities that the urgent issues of our age, conflict, the agonies of modernization, disease and well-being, climate and environment, can be understood and once understood, tackled. Now, this was a piece that he had wrote, op-ed which he had written The Guardian in 2014, and that was a time when there was a lot of debate in the UK about immigration and students being counted as immigrants and all the rest of it. But what was discussed then, lot of water has flown since then. Things have changed to some extent in the UK, but overall, within the context of higher education internationally, globally, I think the context still remains the same. And some of the points which Dr. Vidya alluded to earlier about, the thing of otherness is there everywhere. It's not just perhaps in India, it's elsewhere in the world, and we continue to hear stories and incidents that keep happening. But moving away from that, if we consider higher education as such, higher education has always had an international dimension, either in the concept of universal knowledge and related research, or in the movement of scholars and students. And this has been discussed in the session earlier on in the morning, and even in the keynote by Dr. Sharma, where we talk about the evidence of this can be traced back thousands of years to the centers of higher learning, such as the Confucian schools in China, the Platonic Academy in Athens, the Academy of Gunashipur in Persia, and closer home, we have talked about Nalanda and Takshila. And Takshashila in 5th, 7th century BC was known to have offered as many as 60 subjects, attracting over 10,500, 10,500 students from all over the world. Now, that is closer home. And in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance period in Europe, in addition to the religious pilgrims, there were pilgrims or travelers or peregrines of another kind. And these consisted primarily of scholars and professors and students who did not necessarily visit a religious place or a tomb, but essentially they went to a university in search of learning. Yeah.
So sorry for interrupting. So just beside the Zoom button, so just down below, beside the Zoom tab, there is a slideshow icon. Just click on that. You'll be able to put your entire screen. Niche. So just beside the Zoom. Point where you was.
I've got mute, stop cam mic, stop screen, share, and leave studio.
So not there. So where your PowerPoint is, so move the PowerPoint that you're showing. There is a Zoom scale. Just beside that, there is a slideshow button.
This one.
So
slide sorter.
Right one.
No, not slide sorter.
This one.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that was what I was using earlier, but then you said you couldn't see me, so I just took it off.
So just click on first, sir.
Yeah, that's fine. It'll come there now. You can see now.
Sir, first option. Just click on first option.
First option is pen and laser. See all slides.
No.
You don't want that?
No.
You don't want that?
Yes. Just click on escape, sir.
Sorry?
Click on escape or back.
Escape. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think there are some. Sir, please continue. I'm sorry for.
No. Can you see the slides though?
Yes, sir. It's just. So it's okay. So please continue. It's fine.
Is this big enough?
Yes, sir. That's good enough. So thank you.
I can increase it slightly.
No, it's okay, sir. It's visible. It's kind of visible. If we put it on full screen, it's visible, sir.
Is this visible, or do you want me to make it bigger?
No, sir. It's fine. It's fine, sir. It's fine. It's absolutely fine.
Okay, as long as you can see, it's okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So here we were talking about that these were scholars and professors were moving from one location to the other, not necessarily to places of pilgrimage or tomb, but to the university in search of learning and knowledge. And reasons for this movement is not dissimilar to what drives current mobility among scholars and students, essentially to desire to broaden one's learning and experience, to do research, to earn a qualification, and importantly, to meet and make new friends. Now, let me just share some figures with you, and these figures are, again, as we know, I'm having this problem of my slides not moving. Why is that?
So just use your arrow keys up and down.
Yeah, I'm up and down. Kaam nahi kar raha. Okay, no problem. I'll get there. So here are some statistics. So we have 5.6 million students studying outside their home country. This is from OECD 2020. And of this 5.6 million, just over 2% is globally mobile. That is, I mean, this 5.6 million comprises only 2% of the estimated global enrollment in higher education. In the Indian context, I've got these question marks because one doesn't, as Dr. Vidya highlighted, in terms of the 47,000 students inbound, that is only those who are recorded. How many more, we don't necessarily know. And another figure says 590,000 students went outbound in 2019. But this figure also varies depending on which source you take. But that is just to put it into context in terms of where international students or the mobility part of it. So that's the mobility side of it. So I think it will perhaps be useful at this stage, or if you did do a quick recap in understanding what the literature tells us about globalization and internationalization in the context of higher education. And in this, I draw upon the work of Professor Albach and Jane Knight, who most of you will be familiar from their seminal work in the field of internationalization. So globalization in the narrow higher education context typically makes reference to the broad economic, technological, scientific patterns that directly affect higher education. And internationalization is seen as a response to these realities through processes, systems undertaken by academic systems, institutions, and even individual students. And this could take the form of student and faculty exchange, collaborative research, twinning programs, branch campuses, etc. And when we look at internationalization, the one which is oft repeated is the one by Jane Knight from 2004, the process of integrating an international, intercultural, or global dimension into the purpose, functions, or delivery of higher education. And this has been further developed by Dewitt and Hunter, where they talk about it as the intentional process of integrating an international, intercultural, or global dimension into the purpose, functions, or delivery of post-secondary education. So there are the slight changes here in the sense that they talk about it's an intentional process. And the second part, which is also in italics, is about in order to enhance the quality of education and research for all students and staff and to make a meaningful contribution to society. So it's about inclusivity, and it's about the role of society as well. So when we look at these aspects, how does internationalization then translate to the operating level? So in the next slide, what we see is 3 levels in the operational rollout. Now this was originally conceived of way back in 2003, and whilst it is from 2003, the broad concepts at the various levels still remain the same. What has essentially changed is it has been enhanced. The developments have been primarily in the form of new structures or new arrangements of collaborative arrangements and the delivery of programs. So now we talk about MOOCs, we talk about online delivery, we talk about COIL or virtual learning or collaborative online international learning. But essentially, it's at the 3 levels where we're talking about the mobility of students, strengthening international research, or mobility amongst staff, the internationalization of the curriculum, developing joint academic programs, and then going into aspects of twinning programs, commercialization, extracurricular activities, etc. These 3 levels can also be seen through another lens, as visualized in the next slide. And this is something, again, I take from the work of Jane Knight, where she looks at the 2 pillars as being internationalization at home and internationalization abroad. So before we go on to looking at internationalization abroad, let's try and understand what we mean by internationalization at home. So let me just recall the figure which I cited earlier. Only 2% of the total global enrollment in higher education is globally mobile. So what do we do with the other 98%? The other 98% who are not globally mobile, they could be for a variety of reasons. They could be economic, they could be family circumstances, and a whole host of other reasons. And in a country like India, or it doesn't have to be India, any country, there are those who are not able to take the opportunities which are able to afforded them for mobility, whether it is short term or long term. They are unable to afford those opportunities or take benefit of those opportunities. So should they not to be provided the opportunity to access a global pool of knowledge should they not have access to an intercultural experience. So this is where we go and look at the definition or the work of Billion and Jones and look at what internationalization at home is referred to as. And there we come to looking at it as the purposeful integration of international and intercultural dimensions into the formal and informal curriculum for all students within domestic learning environments. So the point I'm trying to take over here is, yes, internationalization has mobility as a major part, but then as we see, there's a large proportion of students who are globally enrolled in higher education who are not globally mobile for a variety of reasons. And in the context of the Indian higher education system, we know the challenges that we face in relation to mobility, in relation to access, equity, all the rest that come along with it. So how do we make it possible for students, whichever part of the country they are in, to have access to a global, if you say, a learning environment and develop intercultural competence? So these, as they say, do not necessarily have to be on-campus activities. They can extend beyond into the community. It could be through guest lectures, it could be through visiting scholars and engagement with visiting faculty, overseas partner institutions, collaborative projects, etc. These are already happening in some of the institutions across the country. A few years back, along with the CII, I had done a small, it was, I think, probably the first project that was done in trying to understand internationalization within Indian higher education system. And as one would suspect, it was only, the response rate was not that very good in the first study. The second study did a much better response rate, but it was those only who are already internationalized to some extent who had responded. And there are a number of things which I mentioned over here are already happening. Symbiosis being one of them who had participated, and perhaps there are things which are not listed here which are happening on the ground in institutions like that. The other important thing is that the work of Sarai and Troisi suggests that students' perception of gains from such initiatives such as internationalization at home is as much, if not more, than traditional study abroad or travel programs. So when we move from here, so what are the different things that we could look at? So we could look at curriculum, internationalization of curriculum, how initiatives that can be taken for that. I talk of COIL, which in some areas in the literature which originates from Europe or this area, it will primarily be referred to as virtual internships or virtual learning. In the US, State University of New York, SUNY has a massive program, and it's the literature there refers to as collaborative online international learning. In the morning session, Professor Sinha talked about curated programs. So those are certain things which are again possible without mobility being brought in. There are issues which can be addressed through volunteering. We talked, there was this thing about placements and internship, which was discussed, which are challenges. But then again, even for the home student, placements in international global companies which have operations in the country gives them an exposure. Volunteering service learning, which is also referred to service learning in the literature, that's again some aspects which gives them exposure to aspects which are elsewhere. And then we talk about projects and consultancy. Now these are again things which can be done through collaborative partnerships. So the projects and consultancy can work both ways, where the student based in India can have access to projects which are global in nature, maybe working in partnership with students from another, with the partner institution or multiple partners. And these could be depending on the nature of the subject, undergraduate provision, or later stage in a 5-year program, probably in the 4th or 5th year of the program, or in postgraduate programs. Then there are other things which are happening, and again, as we said in the previous presentation, the lack of policy was highlighted. But again, things like visiting scholars, joint publication, joint research projects, conferences, joint academic programs. Again, these are things which, if they are done with that intent and with the clear purpose of why it's being done, the internationalization can be taken forward. Issues that initiatives like summer schools already take place in some institutions, but again, summer schools both ways, in the sense that summer schools which are within or where students are coming in from overseas partner institutions to India, and vice versa. I mentioned language teaching here. Language teaching is both ways. There's obviously the language teaching in terms of for those who are not native English speakers, who are coming to do a course in English language, which will be delivered in English as the medium of instruction. They may need English language support. At the same time, language teaching in terms of languages other than English, maybe European languages, for students based in the UK, whom or even maybe South Korean or Chinese, for purposes of getting exposure to the education and work systems there. The point, other point I make over there is celebrate and showcase diversity. There was a point, I think, which was raised by Dr. Sharma, and even in one of the sessions earlier in the morning, in terms about the diversity that is already there within the country. And I think Dr. Sharma alluded to the fact that, if you don't appreciate what is happening in your neighboring state, how are you going to do that? Now, there is a case there in terms of showing India, showcasing the diversity. First of all, obviously, as Indian students, we need to celebrate and understand our diversity. But there is a major opportunity there in terms of showcasing that diversity to the world outside, and in saying to learn from it. Now, I put the study abroad and exchange mobility in a different shade, essentially because these are not necessarily something which are related to directly with internationalization at home. That involves some amount of mobility in terms of whether it is for a short period, whether it's for a longer period, or for things. So these are some of the initiatives that organizations can take. Now, the recruitment of international students on campus present a whole range of opportunities. Obviously, you have a diverse student body. Students domestic students who do not have the opportunity to go overseas have the opportunity to interact, mingle, understand cultures of different nationalities, etc., etc. But there are perhaps there are also a number of challenges, and some of these challenges were highlighted both by Dr. Sharma and Dr. Vidya in terms of the lack of policy or lack of, some of them are hard issues, and a lot of them are softer issues which sometimes don't get recognized, or people or sensitizing issues. So those challenges are there. So in terms of looking at them, it's multi-layered. So it's unpicking those layers is a challenge. But there are, as I said, a whole range of opportunities and initiatives available. To conclude, what I would say is that bearing unforeseen or disruptive forces, the advancement of globalization and the development of information and communication technology are likely to continue. And as the drive for universities to be both nationally and globally competitive becomes more intensive, the need for long-term sustainability through developing a unique and somewhat differentiated positioning will become increasingly important. And a well thought out and crafted internationalization approach offers a distinct opportunity to achieve this. In this competitive environment, it is, however, well worth remembering that everything that can be counted does not necessarily count, and everything that counts cannot necessarily be counted. Thank you for your time, and I hope I've raised some questions in your mind, which hopefully we'll be able to address later. Thank you.
Yes, so there are quite a few questions. So, thank you, sir, for highlighting, the process. As you said, the process of integrating. It's not just about education, but also intercultural integration for global, in a global dimension for the purpose, and also the importance of mobile collaborative initiatives that can be undertaken, for strengthening the education system. Thank you, sir. Now I would like to invite our next speaker. Mr. Mark Watson. He's the director of design. He's the director, Design Providence, and specializes in interior architecture and industrial design. He trained at the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology and was awarded a Master of Design in 1999. He's a former officer of the Design Institute of Australia, Victoria chapter. Mr. Watson is advisor to the Indian Design Festival, the Delhi Design Festival, and the Odisha Design Festival. He had participated in the International Council for Societies of Industrial Interdesign workshop, Humanizing the Metropolis, held in Mumbai in 2003. He is currently pursuing his doctorate in UNESCO Cities of Design at the Deakin University. Mr. Watson, kindly present your views on the issues that plague the education system and expectations and challenges experienced by foreign students visiting India. So you're on mute.
Yeah, okay, I got that button right. So
Yes.
yes, it's been a very long day, and yeah, I'm following up from some very eminent speakers. Thank you very much, Tiali. I hope my little slideshow will work for you, and it's very much a self-indulgent sort of view of my engagement with India and the internationalization of sharing that knowledge. So usually when I do talk, I largely look for commonality, the things that we share already. So hopefully that'll be eminent in my presentation. So just picking up on what Dr. Shinner was talking about, where he mentioned Taxila, and that place is very much on my bucket list, and because I'm very interested in that cross-cultural mix of the Greek culture that came across and is referenced in the architecture of the place. So I think I was giving a presentation at World University of Design in Delhi, and was talking with the other academic staff there, and some of them didn't really know about that connection. So, but there was a few other staff there that said, "Oh, no, it's very important." It's this kind of even in the Indian context, just having an international person come through and show some interest to express that engagement, and actually elevates the level of interest from Indian academics' point of view. So yeah, I'll try and share my screen in a minute, but just picking up on a couple of other things there from an international perspective, especially art and design. There is organizations internationally called the Cumulus group, which is a shared network and a student exchange program. And from the Australian perspective, I believe there's a program called the Colombo Plan, where Australian universities can send Australian students across to India to engage with various affiliated organizations. So, but just as a snapshot, as a service export, the Indian students annually, I think, in Australia have a net benefit to Australia of about 6.6 billion in fees. And currently in the state of Victoria, where I reside, there was about 68,000 students, I think, in 2019 that were over here and studying. The interesting engagement with India has grown. We're talking about developing economic trade relations, and obviously education is seen as a commodity, but it's from my perspective more important as an opportunity to share ideas and ideals. So the other level of activity that Australia is engaging with India is through the Quadrilateral Agreement with Japan and the US, and it's this area where we can work together and share our interests to to give us a greater understanding of ourselves within this Indo-Pacific region. So I'm going to try and see if we can share, and hopefully I'm not going to have as much of the tribulations. Okay, I'm sharing my desktop, and okay, so are we seeing what we need to see?
Yes, sir. It's fine. It's working.
Okay, that's fine. So I got full screen. That's excellent.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So doing issues on the ground. So thank you very much for asking me along. Sassy Menon, I think, is taking a great risk of having me to come on to talk because I'm seen as what is a pracademic, which is a practitioner as well as a teacher. So I teach sporadically. I was teaching at RMIT University until recently, and last year was University of Melbourne in the Faculty of Architecture. But I'm studying a PhD at Deakin University, as you indicated before. So I'm looking at the three pillars that you put to me, and I sort of took it on my own self journey in design and education, and took on board foundational skills was my foundation as a designer, and knowledge through practice and active reflection is what I'm up to now, and obviously transdisciplinary and business skills is what I see as the future for exchange from my particular viewpoint. So yeah, I'm 40 years engaged in design. About half of that is in teaching. About a quarter of that is in this pracademic mode. So the last decade has been a mixture between practice and teaching delivery. Okay, so Oxford University doesn't actually have a classification for what a pracademic is, but Wikipedia does. So I'm sorry to all the academics in the room for using the Wikipedia platform to put forward, but it's been talked about for the last 30 years as a term, according to Wikipedia. So from the past, my first engagement with India came about at a conference in Ireland, where I was delivering my master's, as it was at that point in time, as a work in progress. It was titled Belonging, so it was 1997. In Ireland, it was Sense of Place. It was a conference put forward by the International Federation of Interior Architects and Designers. And I just went back through the catalogue and saw that Charles Correa was a keynote speaker there. So, and I was in a parallel session talking about my subject matter around belonging. And I was keenly interested in the area of biome, the human environment, and the sense of trying to create a better world at that point in time in 1997. Yeah, so from that master's, it was steeped in Indigenous knowledge systems. I worked closely with the Indigenous community here in Victoria to gain from their knowledge and transpose that knowledge across to contemporary product and contemporary society. And so there's been some interesting developments in that sense of Indigenous knowledge, and this is something that India can share most certainly with their depths of culture, or your depths of culture. But in Australia, we've got what's called the Indigenous Design Charter to preserve the rights of the Indigenous community to their artworks and trademarks and other kinds of protections are associated with that charter. And likewise, the International Indigenous Charter is being developed especially through the the graphic design community internationally. So from that Indigenous knowledge, Australia is where I was talking about that 20 years ago. It's only really come to its head at the moment. This is a slide from the Biennale, the Australian Pavilion at Venice, and it's going to feature strongly an Indigenous design presence in that sense. So I've got some links to that particular article if you're able to share that with the viewers of this seminar. But over on the right-hand side, there's a YouTube link. It's about an hour long. I'm not going to play it, so don't panic. But at the top is a lady by the name of Carolyn Briggs, who's an Indigenous elder, and she has just graduated with her PhD from RMIT University. And I've worked with Carolyn very early in the piece, about 20 years ago. We've been working together, and I'm actually having some conversations with her children, who are also engaged heavily in higher education and gaining senior levels of qualification. And the Jeffer Greenway is one of the first registered architects in Indigenous architects, and is taking a very strong lead, and is one of the designers of the Indigenous Pavilion at the Venice Biennale. So yeah, I through that engagement with the biome that I was working on, very much in parallel with biophilia, I couched it as biomic design. So the International Society of Biourbanism had picked up on biomic design, and I was saying from that particular point, I'm more interested in this. What I'm looking at is ethology, a human-animal centered design, a more inclusive approach to design. Okay, so I gave a paper in Mumbai in about 2003. It was sponsored by the Australia-India Council and supported through our Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. And I talked about the sedition of the gift. And once again, it's the trials and tribulations of a designer and their struggles to realise their dreams. And one of the people I was talking about in that session was the Utzon, Unitson, and the project around the Sydney Opera House. Likewise, another connection that we share in common. I was talking then in 2003 about the American architect Walter Burley Griffin, who was also the designer of our Canberra capital. Griffin worked in Australia from about 1913 through the construction of Canberra, but the world recession, depression as it was in that time, caused him to move further afield, and he moved across to India to practice in India for a time. He, with his American architect wife, Mary Marnie, both worked in the office of Frank Lloyd Wright, and actually took over the office of Frank Lloyd Wright while he disappeared to Japan for a number of years, and formed one of the battles, as Mary Marnie talked about in her treatise on virtually her memoirs called Magic of America. Yes, they both worked in India, and sadly, Walter Burley Griffin passed away in Lucknow, which I'll talk about a little bit in the future, a bit further on in the presentation. So this is still from Sedition of the Gifts. This is Griffin's design for the Opera House in Sydney, as he saw it at that particular point in time. It took another 30 years for it to be built because of the politics of the situation. But it's also interesting to know that it was believed to be a speculative concept that Marion adopted, which were based on designs he did for the Ahmedabad municipal offices in 1938. So this is, again, from that 2003 presentation, Lucknow University Library, which was a Griffin commission. He was working on that site when he had an accident, fell from scaffolding on site and passed away. So this is currently the Lucknow Library, was taken over by an Indian architect and redesigned, and there were some notations on the library website on Griffin's contribution to it, but they misspelt his name from that reading. But there's been some interest in India and that connection. Christopher Vernon has written extensively on that. He's an academic from Curtin University and has looked at Lucknow's forgotten Australian American landscape heritage. So there has been quite a lot of interest from Australia around these kinds of cultural connections that we have with India. And the slide here on the right-hand side is an Indian member diaspora of actually he former member of Parliament in the state territory of the Australian Capital Territory, which is Canberra, and he used that connection to forge relationships with India and Indian academia through these similar kinds of projects. So 2010, I came across to India to present with the trade mission from the Victorian government, and it was a sustainable infrastructure forum. I was largely talking about the experience economy and the opportunities that we have from sharing that knowledge, largely looking at how Denmark started to evaluate the value of the experience economy through cultural tourism and tourism and the like in the development of their arts institutions, and from that was my area of interest in museum design and infrastructure development. So I've done some work on the National Wool Museum, which is based in Geelong, which is very near where I'm living at the moment, and a lot of work that I've done with the Indigenous community in Victoria to develop concepts around sharing of that cultural experience internationally. So yeah, various trips that I've had to India to share my knowledge and skills and look at projects around that are of interest. So I spent some time with the heritage architect Vikas Diwari in Mumbai. He showed me through his work on the Flora Fountain, but he also showed me a pet project that I'm really interested in, and I'm still got to work out how Australia and India can come together to do something about the restoration of Watson's Hotel in Mumbai, which is, he took me through through an adjoining project which he had done, the Navy building, I think it was called, and we were able to view the damage that had been done through neglect of the current owners of Watson's Hotel. So yeah, I'm constantly thinking about how I can engage with investors in Australia and look to collaborate to a way to helping India restore and conserve monuments at this least, and tie in an academic research platform. So yeah, and I'd also spent some time in Ahmedabad and was looking at some museums in that space, especially the works by Le Corbusier. So I have engaged in commentary in India. That's why I think Sasi Menon's asked me to sit in. Talked about task-based competency and problem-based capability, and I think that's a lot of conversation that has emerged from what we've been talking about today. It's how to build these capabilities rather than just competencies, and that's what an education process is all about. So I've written on that, especially our scaling of or scaffolding of our education system across what's called the Australian Qualification Framework, where you can take someone from a certificate 1 through a diploma, through a degree, into higher degrees to the PhD. So I've shared that with India in the past with the, I think it was 2013 in Pune, that was actually held. So yeah, it's India's dilemma. It's been confusing for me to sort of go to places like NID and see students doing a diploma, and then the higher level campuses somewhere else, from the Australian Qualification Framework perspective, the diploma level is largely tapped into that competency, but then there's a shift across to university level education, which then flips over to building capabilities of skill development. And also talking at CII, NID conferences on 2 occasions, talking about design thinking and design doing through innovation in service design effectively. So education is a service industry, and obviously there's great opportunity for design thinking to assist the Indian government in co-designing ways of delivering better outcomes for students locally and internationally too. So your design thinking, I got involved in design thinking about 2010 with the Victorian government's curriculum assessment authority, asking me as an industry advisor to sit in on the development of the academic curriculum for our year 11 and year 12 students, to give an industry overview of the content as it was being developed then for a 4-year period from 2012 to 2016. So through that, I started to engage with an international network in design thinking to crowdsource knowledge on design thinking and the design process, and that was then feeding into the curriculum that we were developing with the Victorian government in their secondary system. So I mentioned in the introduction that I sat in as a counsellor and for a short period of time a vice president of the Design Institute of Australia, the Victorian chapter, and I encouraged the Design Institute of Australia to look at continuous professional development. So we engaged with RMIT University, who funded some research into professional development needs of designers in Australia. And once again, it came across this scaffolding of different levels of qualification and different levels of need within continuous professional development. And then we started to look at recognition of prior learning, how we can assess what people have done without sending them back to a school, and how we could actually evaluate them in a workplace through the recognition of current competencies. So through design thinking, I joined the Design Thinkers group. There's actually a Design Thinkers group membership out of India itself, and alongside that, I've worked with the Digital Society School out of the University of Amsterdam, largely around the Sustainable Development Goals. Yes, so my travels around the world in the last few years, done some work in Japan, spent some time there with Kyushu Institute of Design and doing rapid prototyping workshops to look at grand challenges. And we were particularly interested in water and cities in the Kyushu instance, working out of Fukuoka. But I did some work mentioned at the top there with World University Design, actually engaged with CSIR NERI on air quality. So I work with undergrad students in World University Design with a small smattering of postgraduate students there as well. But they're very much in their emergent stage as a new university, a young university, building slowly towards a full cohort of students as we speak. So giving keynote addresses and the like, workshops again in Gujarat. So we talked about the Interdesign ICSID, now the World Design Organization, in 2014. It was very interesting. It was run out of WE School, private management school with a very keen interest in design thinking. And there was a keynote speaker there, Shirish Shanky, who was then the head of McKinsey. And it was very interesting at that point. He was saying that don't hold back on design. India can afford an infrastructure spend. So it really was that brave forward thinking that led to some interesting outcomes from that interaction. So there were academics and practitioners from all around the world joined forces with Indian designers in a 2-week workshop out of Mumbai. The city of Matunga was the subject that we were looking at, and we came up with some really interesting relative and relevant project outcomes. So to the right, to the left-hand side, is just a stack model that I put together on the project that I worked on with Matunga. We looked at the central workshops, the railway yards there, how to build over the top of the railway shunting yards there, which is vacant space by and large, and treated as building at a destination. So Matunga was an interesting example of commerce and produce. So we came up with a destination of an international marketplace for produce to brand Matunga to its cultural strength. So it's placemaking and the like that we were putting forward. But I'm noticing on the right, recent media that they've actually looked to just do a simple stack over the existing station of Dandar and not interconnecting the 3 stations as I was proposing for that. So it's but they're actually working with a Korean construction company. So the now. So I'm currently doing a PhD at Deakin University, looking at cities of design. Probably more important for you, across this on the right-hand side, that your Ministry of Culture is putting a call out to all states that they can apply, and I think it's still open till probably till the 30th of June. If you're interested in going through the motions of participatory design to co-design with your communities, who actually has the characteristics of a city of design, you can make a submission to UNESCO. But yeah, it's very much what we're talking about here. It's the 3 areas: leadership, design and its benefits, and cities, how to transition cities through design. how to assist leadership to develop policies to improve cities, and design and leadership through innovation is effectively a design culture. So how do you imbue organisations with this design culture? So I know you talked about how you can change the situation of education in India. Maybe this is a way of attending to those changes through looking at developing a design culture and co-designing a better outcome for education in India. So yeah, the development of where I initially started from, we're talking about micro-credentials, MOOCs, lifelong learning, and non-accredited training. So the group that I'm associated with, Design Thinkers Group, does a lot of non-accredited training to industry. This is just a bit of banter that has gone about from the certification of facilitation of non-accredited training. We had a lot of pushback in that particular industry about, you know, what are the qualifications of the people that are doing this non-accredited training. So there was a bit of a hunt to structure and develop a process for a better outcome for design thinking. So yeah, competency out, capability in is a current conversation that's happening out there in the marketplace. So the future, if I can quickly wrap up, future in Australia, education is very bleak. COVID has had a massive effect. We've locked our borders down. We're not having international students in. It's decimated our academic industry. So we have been far too reliant over time on international students to bolster our universities. We're having to adjust to that new scenario. So yeah, there's lots of talk on national media across Australia about the crisis that is currently underway in the Australian university sector. It'll survive. Probably not all the players will be there. There may well be mergers in time, but this is the world we're living in at the moment with COVID. So just other thoughts on internationalism and globalism, sort of a parallel to the Sydney Opera House with this scheme that was put forward by Hyderabad and major projects. There's the commentary on the left is talking about cost overruns and good project management, and so that's probably something that India's going to have to consider with the infrastructure build over time. Yeah, so more recent stuff that I'm doing, talking about partnerships with the through the Sustainable Development Goals. My current work with Odisha and engaging with Odisha through the Consulate General based out of Kolkata that has just been established for the Australian government. So I talked in 2010 about the experience economy, and it has strong parallels to what I'm talking about here. So what do you want? Was the question I was asking in 2010, and I suppose we can equally ask that in 2021. Is it experience by numbers? I was looking at franchises and Indian organisations going out and buying Holiday Inns and building this cookie cutter approach to it to accentuate Indian design within the architecture of growth, or is it the more traditional approach that you're wanting to aspire to? So through that engagement, been looking at workshops with Gujarat Technological University at this particular instance, looking at how design thinking can get them to think about smart cities and heritage combination. Rightio, so I shall try and safely come back to you. Okay. So have we got everyone still on board? You haven't gone to sleep on me, have you? Or
No, sir.
Stop sharing. Okay. All right.
Thank you, sir. That was, it was really interesting, and you touched upon so many things, like the various international network organizations, the role of indigenous knowledge systems, then the commonalities that actually make things global. The role of cultural economy, and thank you for sharing your experiences and your collaboration efforts in India. One of the other things which was really interesting, where you focus on competence to capability, and the continuous need for professional development. So that was really sir.
When
Go
I
on
was
with
when I was doing okay.
yes, sir. That's working.
Okay. When I was working in Matunga on to work with ICSID, we were looking at the street hawkers, and there was a bit of a battle between people in bricks and mortar shops and street hawkers on the streets. And I was saying to the people at we school, street hawkers had the legal right. They'd actually had a permit from the council to occupy an area of footpath. But what people hadn't seen was that they actually were part of the retail economy, part of the service industry and retail, to the very low end. So when I was looking at showing them about the Australian qualification framework, I saw that you could actually do a certificate 1 right down the bottom of the AQF ladder to help the hawkers in hygiene, in basic economics, bookkeeping, at a very low level, not a degree, not even a diploma, it's a very low level to help them get on that ladder because they're part of an industry and they're not just a problem. They are going to be the captains of industry in 10 or 15 years' time. So yeah, it was. It's all very hands-on with me, but all very relevant. So.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. That was really interesting. Now, I would like to welcome the last final speaker of the session, Mr. Sugat Das. He's an expert in the fields of marketing, branding, media design, strategic management, and international relations. He's currently country manager in India for Instituto Europeo de Design Group. He was certified by MIT Sloan School of Management and Design Thinking and Product Innovation. Mr. Das was also awarded an executive certification in leadership and management from the Wharton School, University of Pennsylvania. A postgraduate in media and advertising from Brussels, Mr. Das has collaborated with major brands like Microsoft and Griffin. In the education arena, he has worked with the University of Sussex, Laureate International Universities, and the Indo-Italian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. He has a keen eye for innovation, creation, and efficient implementation in designing of strategies for the discipline of design. Mr. Das, can you share your thoughts on what do you mean by aspiration? I mean, your sub theme is on aspiration. So, what do you mean by aspiration? And knowing that work on motivation and motivating people for higher education. So, how does aspiration, motivation, and higher education actually enables one, to develop and grow and look beyond?
Well, thank you so much, Tiali, and thanks Sushant University, Professor Menon, for this opportunity to share my ideas. I was watching the other speakers speak, and I think in a gamut of largely well-experienced, vast experience speakers, I'm pretty young when it comes to talking about education. But yes, what I do have quite a bit of experience when it comes to students, okay, and their aspirations. That's the specific topic which I'm going to speak with you all. First thing, what we have to understand, what is aspirations? When we talk about in the context of a student, what does it mean for him? We generally think that an aspiration is something that he wants to create or wants to get a degree from a college, and he wants to go ahead and start working in the industry. That is aspiration, according to us, or rather the majority of the people. I, as an educationist, you can call me now, I would say that aspiration means possibilities. For me, aspiration is directly proportional to possibilities. And when you connect these possibilities to motivation, that becomes a big complex chemical structure in the mind. And when these two things come together for a student in his mind, it creates a big nuclear fusion. Okay. Now, this looks like a very scientific approach towards aspirations or motivations, but I would suggest that you should look through the microscopic eye of a teacher. Okay, what does a teacher look in its student? How will a teacher define that this student is very aspirational when he's coming to my class or she's coming to my class? This question, of course, I would not answer this question because a major theme I was discussing is that we leave some questions in the mind of the students. Think about it. That's one thing. The second part of it is motivation. The big word, very big word when it comes to life. Okay, and generally when my students ask me that, I shared with you, Tiali, that the other day, that when my students ask me, what do you design? You call yourself a designer. What do you design? So I really make the life very messy of the students when they ask this question in an open forum. So I ask them, what do you think I design? So they have all sorts of answers: product designer, interior designer, car designer, then fashion designer. I was like very amazed to hear that because I don't think that I have that much sense of fashion. So that's how it is. Then I asked them a question: why you have come to this session, or you are in front of me? They say that I want to gain some insights about my life, what I want to do for my future pathway. Then my answer is, okay, then you have answered my question. I design your life. So like, that's nowhere taught. Right, absolutely correct. So that is a concept which I have created over the years, that I'm going to design lives of student. Not only student, now I am trying to get into a arena which is a very dark arena. I am going to design lives of employees. Yes. Now their motivations, their satisfactions, their grudges. So this is what it is. So the whole thing is all about motivation. How a student is motivated, how an employee is motivated towards his employer. Of course, I can see Tiali frown. So the thing is, it is a very, very vast subject. It has, I generally say that when I design lives of students, I have these 5 aspects in mind, which I think Tiali should focus. First is the passion. That's where you start with your aspiration. Okay. These are 5 concepts of Jivan, as I call it. Your passion, your surroundings, your motivation, your capability building, and finally, financial factors. So this is a globe for aspiration. I think my answer was too long.
No. So, you talked about financial financial. So, how do you make an aspiration financially feasible? I mean, how do you bring about that balance between motivation and feasibility? Because motivation, it's aspirational. Sometimes it's altruistic. It can be altruistic also. So how do you bring about that balance? Or how do you fix, if there is an imbalance, how do you fix the imbalance? imbalance.
Right. So, as I think I was hearing Dr. Kavita that she was telling about a lot of financial factors, a lot of different aspects in Indian education, and the aspirative Indian student. So, yes, there is a financial. I generally call it a financial bias. Okay. So loans which are there, they exist, but they need so much from the student. Scholarships, they exist, but they again need so much from the student. Sponsorships, they exist, but again, they need so much from the corporates. So when you talk about financial feasibility, you have to keep the most important thing in mind, that when you are chalking out an aspirational process, first thing which you should keep in mind is feasibility. Let's connect it to design. When it comes to design, when we talk about a product in India, when it is designed, we first think about the feasibility or market feasibility of that product. Only then it is going to perform as a successful product. People always ask me that, why Maruti Suzuki sells so many cars in India? Because they are not only financially feasible, they are also market feasible cars. Of course, there are other companies who might come and, actually break my neck over here. But this is the feasibility analysis of a product. Why don't we think about it when it comes to an aspiration? Let's take me as an example, as a case study. Few years past, I was also a student. So I had an aspiration. I was a very curious student, so I had a lot of aspirations. But what I thought I wanted to do did not match up with my aspirations, because the financial feasibility was not there. I broke my head everywhere, on every wall. Banks, scholarships, sponsorships, even these kind of nowadays there is a concept called privilege loans. Yes, so somebody who is a bit privileged person or known to that financial lender, they will go and handhold you that, okay, I know this person from these many years, I can write a no objection letter, and you present that letter to that lender, and that lender gives you the money on the basis of this guy. Okay, so yes, this was not there at my time, of course, but does this mean that I'm not eligible to think about a course in Harvard? Does my financial capability? That's the point which I raised in my above answer. Capability building. It's a big thing. So when you do capability building, you match two things: passion, financial capability. Your passion is on the right hand, your financial capability. Okay, you cannot say that I want to become a doctor, I will crack Harvard, maybe 3 crores or 2.5 crores. How will you match that? Not possible. So when you are trying to add your mind to an aspiration, to a motivation, first thing you should think about is the feasibility. And when you ask me this question, how will you make it balanced, right? This is the balance. Awareness, more explorative capabilities or analysis. And third thing, rather making only qualitative, quantitative analysis as well. Okay. So you have a plan B, a plan A in hand, plan B in hand, plan C in hand. So all my students, when they talk to me, they always have these 3 plans. If they don't make it, I make their life miserable. So they have these 3 plans with them. So I always tell them, okay, plan A is the most elite plan for you. When you say how I balance it, plan A is the most elite plan. I want to go to Harvard University. Fair enough. Okay, financial feasibility not there. Now the next plan, calm down. I want to go to HEC Paris. Of course, okay, fair enough. Not possible. Third plan, I will stay in India, complete my bachelor's, then go abroad for master's. 3 different planary examples for the student. That's how I would like to balance it out.
Like, that's really interesting. So you talk about financial feasibility, and just also talking. Yes, there's a balance to it. Okay, you make things possible, but there is also you're talking about designing of life. Now, when you try to design life, there is always that perseverance that comes into play. So
Yeah.
you have to persist and persevere. You have the highs and the lows. So how do you train students, or how do you motivate students to maintain that, to persevere through the highs and the lows?
Okay. See, the first thing when a student, like generally the way we have in India, a very well-known fact called software life cycle, right? So we have a student life cycle. I call it a student life cycle. In the student life cycle, let's take a example of a 12th standard student. When a 12th standard student joins, nowadays there is a lot of peer pressure, a lot of parental pressure surrounding. I mean, if I start numbering the pressures, there will be so many pressure that it becomes a pressure cooker in his mind. So this student, when he or she comes and approaches me for the first time, so I'm approaching with you in front of you with an example so that it's more clear for everyone. So at that point in time, what I do is to understand the student. So my first statement, of course, I had the operations in India for Istituto Europeo di Design. I belong to the design field. I would want, or you would expect a first answer from me. Oh, thank you very much. Welcome to Istituto Europeo di Design. Let's talk. Unfortunately, this is not my answer. My answers to the student is, let's create your life. Because what you have lived till now was something, kind of cocoon, which you were there with your parents. Your life starts, or rather, year zero of yours starts now. And we are going to build this for you. This one sentence, and I have numerous examples. I have a bandwagon of more than 5,000 students whom I have spoken to in these last 10, 11 years. So this one statement in their lives creates a big difference. The next question which comes from that side is, okay, so how we are going to do that? I will come to perseverance at the end. I'll connect that. So I tell my student, first tell me what you want from life. It becomes, the first session for at least 15-20 minutes becomes a very big yarn session for the student, because he is reflecting into something very new. He has not faced these kind of weird professionals whom you are calling or you are talking about an admission process, and he is giving you yarn. So the transition process is a bit awkward at the start, but then the student understands that this, why do you think? Okay, let's pause here a bit and ask you a question. What do you think I intend to do with this process?
Just to understand why they came, and what are the setbacks or some things which might hold them back. Maybe that's what you're trying to understand.
Basically, what I'm trying to understand from them is to get into something which makes them feel happy. And why I am doing this. I think there is a concept which we have in our lives, and that has come in everybody's life. That is called midlife crisis. Every professional will relate to this. There's a midlife crisis, and we talk about big things here. I don't want my student to go through this. And you know how we do this? Because we understand at the very root what he wants from his life, what he's reflecting in his life. So my 3 questions, that's my colleagues generally call it a 3 golden formula. So first question, what do you want from life? Second question, how do you want to approach it? And third question is basically criticizing himself for that. Do you really want that? The student goes back home with these 3 questions. I give them a time of nearly 5-6 days. Think about it. Get back to me after 5-6 days. The student comes back with all sorts of weird answers. You can't even imagine what kind of answers I get. So, but one thing is clear, the last question, that answer majority of the times is yes, I want to do this. This is me. Fair enough. Okay. I'll give you an example here, which is not very confusing, because you know what happens when you have a Gyan theory, it becomes so confusing that the audience is left like, what the hell he was talking. So I always like to exemplify things. Here, for example, a student is very crazy about cars, very crazy, or bikes or cars. He tries to sketch and everything. So their parents might think he can become a car designer only. They come to me with that student and say, you know, he sketches very nicely, he does this and that, so he can become a car designer. Fair enough. You see, there's a straight goal, there's a focus, there's a motivation as well. Not only the students, but also parents. Now, next question, I speak with the student. My dear friend, does this excite you? No, sir, I just do it when I'm sitting at the last bench in my class and I like doodling, so I do it. Wow. So do you think that this is a career option for this student, or this is going to create a future pathway? No, because he's just doing it for fun. I ask the next question. So if you don't like this, if it's just a pastime, what do you actually like? Oh, you know what? I love cricket. Fair enough. Everybody loves cricket, majority of us. But tell me, would you commercialize that cricket for your life? Then he's thinking, now here comes the demon. Maybe. Of course, this whole conversation is happening outside the boundaries of his father and mother, the parents. Because if I start talking there, then, as I said, there is also an aspect of surrounding in designing for life. So he says, yeah, you know, sir, I love you because, you know, you actually got me right. Okay, so I become the Krishna of his life. I'm giving that kind of satire, or you can say not satire, satisfaction, which he never had in his lifetime. That there are 2 motives over there. One motive is to actually give him a focus. The other motive, commercial focus here, and a career future pathway focus. The second motive is to make him connected with me, so that till the time he is not taking up the reins of his future pathway, I am there with him to handhold. That's how it is. And okay, sorry, Tiali, I forgot. Perseverance. You know, everywhere in the industry, there's a lot of sustainability word. Oh, this is sustainable, that is sustainable.
Overused and overabused.
Yeah, overabused. I agree with you. So perseverance in a student's life is also sustenance, sustainability about his life, his choices, sustainability about his thought process, sustainability about his mindset. Nobody thinks about it. Now, maybe the audience might think, oh, we are not talking to somebody who is in education, he's a psychologist. No, you are talking to a person from the education sector, but I like to look it from a very different aspect. Maybe on this side of the spectrum. Not, I believe in disruptive technology or disruptive strategy. So this is what is my disruptive strategy. Perseverance, sustainability should be there. How? You have to bring all the stakeholders together. The surrounding, the passion, it's all connected. Surrounding, passion, motivation, overall, the globe of aspiration. That's what is more important for us.
Makes sense. We actually have quite a lot of questions also coming in. So, we can open up the session and maybe bring in all the speakers and, actually address it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
There's quite a few questions also which has come in. APSC, can you please add all the speakers also so we can actually have the Q&A session, because there are quite a few questions which is coming. So, one of the first questions that has come in is also for Professor Rajkumar. So you talked about internationalizing education and mobility. Yes, you gave us various alternatives, as to how education, can be taken. What are the various other ways of collaborating? But especially with this current situation of restricted mobility. So how do you internationalize education with restricted mobility, and how do you innovate the learning spaces considering the restricted mobility?
Okay, so again, I go back to the point which I had mentioned earlier. When we talk about mobility, going by current figures, it's only about 2% of the total global higher education enrollment. So 98% or 97 point whatever percent is not globally mobile. So does that mean that they shouldn't have an international or a global learning experience? For whatever reason they're not mobile, that's a different issue. So the last probably 18 months or 15 months has shown that there are things which the higher education sector would have probably taken years to think about, which they have had to do on the fly, as it were, because the circumstances were such that they had to take technology to enable things to happen. And the very fact that we are now communicating and having this session, in a normal circumstance, you would have had this conference, you would have had a whole bunch of people coming into your campus or to some location in Gurgaon or in Delhi, deliberating over a day, over lunch, tea, coffee, etc. All of that has gone, and it has not taken away the richness of the interaction. The richness continues. Okay, there are challenges in terms of connectivity, technology, etc., but those are lot smaller challenges which can be overcome, right? So one of the points which I mentioned in the thing was about the thing of virtual learning or virtual exchange or collaborative online international learning. That doesn't require people to move location. It is between collaborating organizations, and it doesn't have to be bilateral. It could be multilateral. It's like a big project team. And one of the things I think I discussed with you or one of other colleagues is most of the internationalization initiatives happen because of the individuals who are involved, not necessarily because of the organization. And Dr. Sharma will probably bail me out of this. All the initiatives that she has been involved with has happened because she's been the champion. Not because the institution has said you go ahead and do it. The institution actually sometimes puts in barriers, health and safety, other issues which come about. So it happens despite the institution. So currently we are in a situation where technology enables us to connect. So technology is an enabler. rather than, it has to be online or offline. It's not online or offline. Technology is enabling us to do it. So there could be some elements which are offline, which they do themselves. They engage on their own, and then they come forward. So I think one of the things I was actually writing down, if I can find the thing, there are three aspects to it. One is, if you look at it in a broader scale, right, in terms of expanding inclusiveness and having also equity. Because right now, when we say technology, we assume that everybody is well connected. Sometimes in the developing world, they are better connected because technology has rolled out earlier or later. So people have got 4G or 5G connection, but it may not necessarily be the case in some parts of rural United States or even in the UK or Canada. So there are three aspects. One is the person or the organization which does the content, the accreditation. So look at it as a university, look at it as a higher education institution, or someone who can provide that accreditation. Then comes the part where it is being delivered. Sometimes the content creator and the institution which is accrediting, it may not necessarily be delivering. So you need a partner to deliver. So that could be a community organization, it could be a not-for-profit organization, it could be a voluntary organization which is delivering, or another educational institution. But the link in this, in terms of widening this, is the technology provider. And when I talk about the technology provider, it's not necessarily just the software provider which is putting it together, but also the provider who is providing you the internet connection, the bandwidth, the hours, the minutes. So we come across a lot of situations where in some parts of Africa and Southeast Asia as well, where people are actually having to go to, it's happened in the US as well. People are using the college parking space or the McDonald's, because that's where the bandwidth is there. At home, they're not getting the bandwidth. So there is that opportunity here for the higher education institution, for want of any other expression, let me just call it the community thing right there in the community, and the provider, the internet service provider, whether it's the Vodafone, the Airtel, or whoever it is, to give you that thing, to be able to then include. So coming back to your earlier thing about the collaborative online provision, so it's about collaboration between organizations, I'll take the thing which Dr. Vidya alluded to, it's about like-minded organizations. And like-minded doesn't necessarily mean like-minded because of your financial muscle that you share, but you share the same, if you like, vision. That's what you want to achieve at the end. And you'll find champions who, if you get the champions, I think, you're an urban planner, so you know from your experience with projects. Projects happen because the people involved are passionate about it. And taking cue from what Sugat mentioned, it's the same thing here. It's about passion and perseverance. Why are you doing it? What is your intent? And that intent has to be followed by investment, and whatever that investment is, soft, hard, etc. And then you have infrastructure. I think it's a slightly long way of answering your thing, but that's where I see it in terms of the collaboration.
Thank you, Rajkumar. My next question is for Dr. Sharma. So the question is, we talk about the lack of, often, we talk about the lack of political will, which kind of doesn't shape. And is there in the National Education Policy 2020, is there a shift in political will, or is this some kind of a pseudo stance to indicate change?
You want me to answer that?
Yes.
Yeah. No, we can't say pseudo stance. It's just as Vidya was saying, at least there's a chapter there. Mm-hmm. But the point is that, yes, it's an aspirational thing, but now to implement it, you have to do a lot of work. And so, to label it pseudo will mean that you don't do anything at all. So the thing is that you have to remain positive that if somebody has bothered to write a chapter on it, then there is a degree of seriousness. And 2022 is the year when they want to unfold the implementation. The school implementation has already started to some extent. So let us see how it works out. And I have a feeling that the private universities will be better positioned to implement it than the public sector universities, because the private universities will not have so much of vested interests developed over years and years that the public sector universities have. Among the public sector universities, the unitary universities will be in a much better position to implement it than the affiliating universities. See, there are universities with 500 colleges affiliated to it. How do you expect anyone, how does it happen? It doesn't happen. Even in Delhi University with 80 colleges, all in one city, affiliated to one university, there is such a divergence of opinion. How will they implement anything? So therefore, what will happen is, I think that in the private universities will be better positioned to implement it, and then will come the unitary universities. The state universities will have a harder time because they're also dependent on budgets from their states, which also become very politicized. So our best bet is central unitary universities, management institutions. There is a lot of private medical schools, and you will have the unitary universities which will be able to implement it. It's just that they will need to be given a little more incentive and a little more encouragement.
Thank you, ma'am. The next question is actually for Mr. Watson. So the question: what should a higher education institution of the future look like in a global situation, especially keeping in context when we talk about education without borders?
Yeah, look, it's economy that comes into play here. People's ability to be able to navigate that. So it's interesting to see with COVID the leading into technology to support the online situation we've got here has through necessity been adopted by higher education. In Australia, there was some sort of cynicism about online training. A lot of faculty were pushing back against that, preferred face-to-face, and it's a new way and getting some serious consideration now on how to engage in that interface and that sharing of seamless education. So it's interesting from an Indian perspective, with a very strong academic record in universities. Obviously, other nations around the world would operate on a sliding scale of abilities. So it's hard to think about a totally seamless approach to it, but where there are synergies, I think it's going to only improve that as we, as practitioners, engage and learn how to develop through that use of the new technology interface. As to quality, that's everyone's concern. How to manage that and deliver that. I think that the curriculum development and online learning tools have really elevated themselves over the period. The last 5 years in Australia has seen a massive development of better practice and a better quality of curriculum and delivery. So yeah, it's we talk about online. It's usually not all online. There's a small amount of face-to-face as we were talking about before, or was mentioned before, the students collaborate together online behind the scenes. So it's not so much a dedicated role of a practitioner to sit there and overview as you do from a face-to-face classroom scenario. But it's auguring quite well for this seamless approach to collaboration and the like. So, and I think I'm touched on trade relationships. It's a bit embarrassing from an Australian perspective with the imbalance of trade that India's buying a far lot more of Australian product than Australia is buying from India, and it's through that trade negotiation, that cultural diplomacy, that I see that there's some strong gains for education to lean on and leverage their various governments to facilitate better relationships via that medium. But it's an interesting spiel. So we're all just waiting for the borders to lift here in Australia. We're talking about midway through 2022 for our borders to be opening up, but we're starting to come up with innovative approaches to it, with dedicated quarantine facilities, which are probably going to end up doubling as student accommodation centres and the like, to allow people to come in and then fully integrate within the communities COVID-free. But yes, it's giving us that light bulb moment to see the opportunities that we can utilise to better collaborate internationally and share in this in the service industry of education.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. The next question is for Mr. Ross. So it's a twofold question. The first is, what are the challenges that you experience while doing while designing a student's life, and what are the support structures that help to match an aspiration with the feasibility?
Okay. The first thing is the challenges, of course, with the kind of structure we have, with the kind of challenges or issues we are facing more in the COVID-19 times. I would say that when I talk to a student, the basic issue which comes up is a financial feasibility, which I was talking to you before. So here, this challenge again depends on of course, when I talk to a student, first and foremost thing, I understand the passion part of it, the motivation part of it, everything is fine. But again, the next step is to talk to the surrounding. Surrounding means their parents, their mentors, if at all they are influencers for that student, and actually understand whether they are in a position or a financial capability which can support the student. Nowadays, which I have seen, there is an urge, and this is something where I feel really good and proud about our students in India. There is an urge from the parents that, okay, yes, you go over there. I will do whatever is possible to get you there. But then again, the student says that I don't want to put my parents in that kind of situation where there is a lot of troubles financially. So the midway for this is, of course, you say about it, scholarships and staff, of course, that is there. And giving them an extra help from my personal end that, you have to contact this and this, finding out ways which are apart from the university to offer them a financial aid kind of stuff. That is one midway which we have come out. There are a lot of being associated or part with the Italian embassy. There are a lot of things which the Italian embassy is doing to promote, education for Indian students. They are helping them with various kind of scholarships, various kind of grants. So that is also a part of this mid-management of the issue. And the other issue which is there specifically, I would like to place this issue which is coming up and which has been a part for me, is the blockage of mindset when it comes to girl students. So I have experienced a lot of girl students, and the other part of it is that the parents or the elders in the family don't want to send a girl student abroad for a bachelor's degree. But okay, you do one thing: you want to go abroad for studies, do your bachelor's here, take up your degree, and then you go for masters. Now, the basic problem here for a girl student, which they have only shared with me, is the moment they complete their bachelor's, there is so much of noise about their marriage and settle down. So ultimately, the student, I mean, I have shared stories with you. I generally do these design thinking workshops in various schools and colleges all across India. So there have been students who have come up to me, cried even in public, stating that this is an issue. Can you speak to my father, mother, grandmother even? So I always share a nanny story with everybody. So that is there. And you know, we might shy away from this, but this is the truth that is there. How, you know, in those cases, I actually have to sit down with everybody to convince them, rather than the student convincing those surroundings. I convince them that, okay, you know what, I just want to add value to your daughter or, you know, granddaughter. So they have this question always that, you know, it's okay, tell me one thing, what's the problem if I send her for masters? Why you want her to go for bachelor's? I always tell them this thing, that I am pretty sure you're not going to send for masters. They're like, no, I promise you I will send for masters. So look, you write in a bond paper and give it to me that you are going to send her for masters. Just to add some humor to it. But then this is a serious problem. It might not seem a problem for us sitting here, but think about that 17.5-year-old kid who is fighting this out on a daily basis. That's what is it. First thing. Second thing is, when you connect this to aspirations. Now, let's directly connect this same challenge to the aspirations part. What happens? I have seen a student. Of course, it goes either on the positive side or on the negative side. So I have seen the positive side of of one student. I have seen the negative side of aspirations as well. So the student, with all the challenges, he came to me. He spoke with me for hours. We discussed. I think this was a bachelor student who came to me for masters. He was not able to go because of financial constraints. After speaking with me for days, finally he landed up to a solution that, okay, you know, Sugat sir, I will not be able to go for sure because I don't have that much of finance. So I said, okay, fine. But you know, your life doesn't end here. Do something valuable because you have a God-gifted talent. He was very interested in transportation design. So this guy, what he did, he started being a tutor because he was very good at sketching and all that stuff. He became a tutor at an academy which prepares students for design, NID entrance exams, NIFT entrance exams. And finally, I'm really proud that student started his own academy just a year before, and now they are working on a working prototype of a car which is fueled by electricity. It's an EV car. So this is a battery operated car. So this is an positive side of aspirations after overcoming challenges. Negative side, I have seen students have left their studies. They had a big fight with their parents, not able to go abroad, taken up call center jobs, landed up nowhere. After 4 years down the line, came crying, sir, I want to go for masters. I said, I can't help. And ultimately, just getting a frustration out of everything. And, you know, the best part is I can still talk to them and make their life a bit easier when it comes to the frustration which they have. But that is what I said, connecting challenges to aspirations on the negative side as well as the positive side. I'm sorry if the answer was too long.
It's fine. It's fine. No, it makes sense. It brings a lot of perspective to it also. My next question is actually for Dr. Sharma, Professor Gautam, and Mr. Watson. The question is, what is your view on, we talk about collaboration, and what is your view on actually not only just collaboration but co-creation of educational programs and with different countries? Do you think that is a viable option? Will that work out?
You're talking about creating educational programs for a college or a university, right? Yes, of course, it's a viable option that you collaborate to create educational curriculum and programs and even pedagogy. And also, I think you need to not just have teachers or faculty into it, put some students into the mix, put some senior students into the mix, because they have just gone through that, whatever has been your curriculum. They have hands-on experience of what they thought about it, and now they are not, they're finished their whatever course they were doing, so they're not scared of negative marking or impressions and all of that. So you need to, I think what we don't do enough in India is to hear the student voice. We need to incorporate them, because they are the people who are hands-on, victims or beneficiaries of whatever we are doing. So I think you need to, yes, of course, it's a very worthwhile collaborative project to collaborate on educational content and processes and teaching learning methodology. But as I said, with some students also into the mix.
Yeah, just to build on what Dr. Sharma said. I mean, we at my institution, I mean, I have a couple of projects which we run where we call it students as academic partners. So the students are part of the design of the curriculum or design of the project, and they are students who are very much doing a course. So they are not alumni. So they are students who may be in the second year, or usually they are second or third year of their qualification. Sometimes you do get first year students if they are mature students who really want to come in, and it really helps because we run those programs. In fact, there's one proposal which I have put just now to look at students as academic partners for what internationalization should look like, because the institution where I am at is a public university, and in the UK, to recruit international students, the institution needs to have a permit. So it's just like a work permit. So you need to have that license, and on the back of that license, you recruit. So there are a few institutions, and my institution is one, where we currently don't have that license, but we still have international provision, like exchange, bilateral, multilateral, etc. So we are looking at what internationalization should look like. And going back to the original thing about can you design curriculum? The biggest challenge is when two academics get together and they decide, okay, what are we going to do? It's the system, because you start getting into who's going to have the intellectual property rights, whose curriculum will it be, whose syllabus is it going to sit in, and what else. If you leave that aside and you say, okay, fine, let's design a course for students who are going to do this course in international, say, business or international marketing. That's business is my area. So let's say it doesn't matter where it sits. Let's design the course and let it be your course. Let it have your
imprint on it,
your nomenclature and number and what. But the learning outcomes are agreed, and once the learning outcomes are agreed, you work with it. I'll give you a very simple example of in internationalization, people talk of twinning and progression and all the rest of that, where two universities are saying, okay, if I've done 2 years of your course, can I join, at the advanced level, can I join in year 3 or year 4 or whatever it is? And they say, oh, we've got to map your curriculum and see what we meet, etc. And it can go on for months quality office will come in, all sorts of things. But there are simple ways of doing it, because what are you trying to assess? You're trying to figure out whether the student who comes out from college X will be able to cope with the demands of your course, which is university wide, right? So all that you have to do is design a course, a module. You can say, here's the module, you need to complete this module as part of your progressing from year 3 of your course there to year 4, and you've got to pass that, and you need to do maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks of pre-course formal course thing, which is basically refreshing you, or going back to the point which is the pedagogical differences. So if you're coming from a very exam-oriented setup to something where there is coursework and presentations and group work and stuff like that, you might have challenges. It's possible, but unfortunately the systems take over. The architecture takes over, and then you design a house because you want to live in, but then the rooms start controlling as to how you're going to live. That's the challenge. But it's possible, definitely possible. Again, you need like-minded people with the passion, and you've got to persevere. It doesn't happen. You've got to keep chipping away. You'll always, for one person who wants to do the thing, there are 2 people who don't want the thing to happen. And you might call me the cynic out there, but that's there's so many barriers which will come. And some of them are actually not barriers, but they make it sound like that. That's definitely possible.
Well, academics can make anything sound very, very high. I mean, that's their whole job. I mean, they make what they don't want to do. They make it sound very high flying, theoretical construct on it, which is not really true.
And you have committees. So committees have a purpose. So you push it to the committee. Let the committee decide. The committee will meet 6 months later. By that time, you have lost your interest on that project. You want to do something else. So that's what I was saying. In 15 months, higher education institutions have been able to do things which they would have not done. The fact that you're delivering classes over Zoom, which is not even your proprietary item. It's somebody else's thing. It's unthinkable, right? I mean, it wouldn't happen in my institution as well. We are a small institution. And I have had students doing their presentation over Zoom. They're doing posters and they're sharing posters, and the whole class is participating. They are in different places. It was impossible. Nobody would have thought about it, but it couldn't go through committee. There was no committee. So it's happened. And this is something which I think colleagues across the sector all over the world will say the same thing. Things which were not possible are now possible. Let's not lose that. Let's build on that and take it forward and see what we can do. It's not this, this business that people say, oh, are you doing online? Are you doing offline? Are you doing hybrid? Those are all terms. It's like, is learning happening is what you want to know. Are people learning? Are they engaging? Are they participating? Can you get group work happening using Zoom? You can do all of it. You just have to, it's not going to be the same. I mean, if we were in a room today over coffee or over lunch, there would have been other discussions. So right now, all that you can do have a virtual coffee or a virtual lunch. It's not the same, but we still are being able to do it.
But I think we have been, as you rightly say, we've been able to do far more than if we had not been pushed by the pandemic to do it.
Yeah. There's lots of positives which are there.
Lots of things without the bureaucracy of the university taking over. You just have to do it. That's all.
Well, I always, when we are in these meetings, I always say, now we have to wait for the person who's going to come out with subclause 6.7 subsection 3. You can't do it because of that, and then it gets pushed on to the next one.
Mr. Watson, your view on this?
I just took trying to get a word in edgewise.
Yeah, sorry.
It's good. It's good. It's good. I just took down 3 notes then. I had a conversation online with some colleagues. They were describing a sort of situation, and I just went in and said, you're talking action research here, aren't you? And that's where a teacher just comes up with a strategy and delivers it as a test. And it's for researchers actually whether it worked or not, and whether you can develop the curriculum in that particular sense. from an industry perspective, we've got a program that's developing here in Australia called Work Integrated Learning, and that's almost like job placement, where the students go out later in their academic career to be placed in industry, and the work that they're doing in industry is included within their the curriculum of the subject that they're doing at the time. The other instance is the student voice, as we were talking about. We have something called the customer experience score, and I think you're seeing in some of the university rankings on the international sense, the student experience is starting to be elevated in that ranking regime, and there are strategies in place to evaluate where the student actually passes a teacher as to whether they were good, bad, or indifferent. So as long as they give their score after the teachers have done their assessment, I think it sits well with me. But yeah, it is part of that student voice as to the quality delivery and some feedback on content. But a true co-design between students obviously involves student placement on faculty course development committees, which obviously would include industry as well. So most courses or most faculties have their select group of industry practitioners that come in and give industry relevant feedback to show the government that they are meeting industry need and expectation, and then have the free rein then to be able to structure their own curriculum by and large to suit their particular industry focus and the intellectual direction that they want to take that. So develop along the line of that faculty. Yeah, so there were just three things that I picked up on, but could be helpful, and I don't know if they actually exist in India.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, all of you. It was really an interesting. I wish I could continue this session. This is really an interesting. We talk about, the last session was all about concepts and things, and this is actually all about, what you finally do on ground. And I wish I could continue this. I'm really sorry. Unfortunately, we have to wrap up this session. Thank you, everyone, for your, for participating, for your views.
All the best to you. Thank you.
There's also a third session where we have the vote of thanks from the Vice Chancellor. It would be really nice if you would join. Dr. Kumar.
Thank you very much for handling the session. We had minor glitches with technology, but that's part of it. That's the excitement. I hope you could see my slides. I don't know, but anyway, as long as you could hear it.
We could see your slide. We could see your slides, so don't worry.
Yeah, but that's okay. That's fine. That's part of the challenge. That's that is the smaller challenge.
That's the human part of it, rather.
That's also, I think, nowadays we have a concept called human-centered design, so we need to think about this concept as well. So thank you so much, Tiali. Thank you, everybody, and it was a pleasure being in the company of so many learned people. So thank you so much.
Thank you
very much. It was a pleasure meeting everybody, and I think we became friends over these couple of hours. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.